All right, let's get started here on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard live Q&A here from New Jersey, where the New York Football Giants had quite the day. I have a drink in my hand. I need one after that long first day of free agency. Thanks for joining me here to break it all down. Saquon Barkley to the Philadelphia Eagles, Brian Burns to the New York Giants, Xavier McKinney to the Green Bay Packers. We'll break it all down here. Jacob Petruzzi gets us started off with the comment I love. Smack that like button and hit that sub button for Pat. Appreciate you reminding everybody of that, Jacob. Thumbs up, please, while we are live. That tells everybody that we're here, helps us build the community that is this Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast and the live Q&As we do twice a week here in the offseason and during the Giants regular season, talking NFL and also New York football. Remember, we are YouTube, Threads, Instagram, TikTok at PL on NFL, and on X at P Leonard NYDN. Of course, the New York Daily News website and the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast. Going to get right to your questions. First, want to tell you about Bet Online. Continues to be your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year. With up-to-the-minute odds, stats, and trends, you can follow our favorite teams' path to the playoffs with in-game live betting contests and all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices. Head to Bet Online today to become part of the team. And remember to use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. And I'm going to start getting right into the questions. Jacob says, does Burns potential does the Burns acquisition change the Giants' strategy in the draft? Maybe offensive line first round. So, Jacob, I do think that the Brian Burns trade, so the Giants acquire Brian Burns from the Carolina Panthers. Joe Schoen swings a blockbuster deal for the Panthers edge rusher, 8.5 sacks last year. Still a young player, developing player, was looking to get paid compensatory to what he believed his value was. Similar to how Saquon Barkley was looking for a team to pay him what he felt he deserved and what he could bring to his next team. And so the Giants trade a second-round pick this year. That's their number 39 overall pick. So they got 47 from the Seahawks. They're trading 39. And then also a fifth-rounder in next year's draft. They're also doing a pick swap in the fifth round. But the big deal of it is they're paying him a 5-year, $150 million contract with $87.5 million guaranteed. That $30 million a year now makes Brian Burns the second highest paid edge rusher in the league by average annual value, behind only Nick Bosa of the San Francisco 49ers. So obviously you're investing in a player that you're hoping can help develop with your team because he's still younger, but you're also paying for immediate production. So you have Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns. You're looking for it there. How does it affect the draft, Jacob? I think you don't have as much ammunition if you're the Giants, if you want to move up. Now, I do think from my reporting, and I think you guys also have been smart enough as we've been talking through these live chats to discuss how it was going to be difficult to get into the top three no matter what. You know, you look at the Patriots getting Mac Jones out of town, trading him to Jacksonville, signing Jacoby Brissett as a veteran, clearly looking at the idea of bringing in a rookie who can either jump in right away or develop behind a veteran like Brissett, a familiar guy, returning to New England, a former Patriots draft pick. And so you have the Bears, Commanders, and Patriots at 1, 2, 3, just going to be very difficult to get there. So for the Giants strategy, I do agree with you that, you know, the idea that maybe drafting at 6 is even more likely now than moving up for that quarterback. You still have Arizona and the Chargers ahead of you, maybe other teams bidding to come above you. Obviously, Atlanta, though, signing Kirk Cousins now falls out of that mix. So that's one team not to worry about. So many doors to think about, so many dominoes that fall or don't, and other doors that open depending on which way these teams go, right? You think of the Barkley sweepstakes where the Houston Texans are in that. Chicago Bears are in the market. They end up going with DeAndre Swift from the Eagles. But the Eagles end up landing Barkley. If he goes to the Texans, then where do the Eagles go, right? Austin Eckler ends up going to the Commanders. Does he go to the Eagles if they don't get Barkley, right? And so on and so forth. So it's fascinating to see how every move affects another. But I think offensive line in the first round, possibility. I still think wide receiver, if they're going a position there, is most likely, especially because Jermaine Elomanor, a player we talked a lot about from the Las Vegas Raiders, their starting right tackle from last year, the Giants bringing him in on a 2-year, $14 million deal. And the idea there is that sources I talked to said that they still want to give Evan Neal one more shot at securing the right tackle position, proving he can play there opposite Andrew Thomas. And so from the Giants standpoint, signing a guy like Eluemunor, mispronounced his name the first time, sorry about that. When you sign Eluemunor, you get a guy who played for their O-line coach in Vegas and New England, Carmen Brasillo, so he's familiar. He can, relate things between the coach and the players. He'd be a conduit there. He also has proven he can capably start games. So if he beats out Evan Neal and they kick Evan Neal into guard or into a guard competition, then Eluemunor can start for them. Or if Neal wins the job, Eluemunor becomes a reliable veteran swing tackle behind Thomas and Neal, whether it's week to week or in game. If a guy is struggling, like if Neal is struggling on the right, because one thing the Giants are, of course, very sensitive to is how poorly the offensive line, including its depth, was constructed to start the year last year. And then Thomas's injury in week 1 against Dallas really set them back in a huge way. And they weren't capably prepared personnel-wise to recover quickly enough. And so Eluemunor, that's where that signing comes in. And then obviously John Runyon Jr. coming from the Packers. Giants came in lower on the guard market than I was expecting, frankly. But of course, when I identified coming out of the NFL Combine that offensive guard and edge rusher were the two positions the Giants were going big game hunting, usually it falls that you're looking at top targets in those areas. And if you make the enormous splash at one, you're probably going a little bit lower on the other one. And so Burns, of course, ends up being that big deal. And frankly, when Runyon came in at $10 million a year on that 3-year contract to likely be right guard. I mean, he played right guard last year for the Packers. He has played both left and right, though. So he'll go into a competition there. My thinking right away is that he ends up talking to people, starting on the right, seeing where that goes. But right when he signed, I think immediately your mind goes to, okay, edge is where they're going to spend. Of course, it ends up not being Danielle Hunter. It ends up being Brian Burns, who have had about half the sacks last year, but also much younger. And of course, you're playing on a bad team. Your team's behind a lot. But Jacob, I'm not answering your question directly. I still think wide receiver is where is more likely there. Though I can personally say that if I'm the Giants general manager, it's never too many offensive linemen to draft one more. I know Thomas was a high pick. Neal was a high pick. 2 years ago, the draft didn't go well for the line with Joe Shane's first round with the Giants. So I wouldn't blame them at all if they went O-line again to protect their quarterback, both Daniel Jones, the asset they've invested in, and likely the rookie they potentially end up taking somewhere in this draft. But that said, I still think wide receiver, based on how the board falls, if 3 quarterbacks do go in the top 3 picks, then you're looking at landing for sure one of the 3 of Odunze, Neighbors, and Harrison Jr. And so to me, that'll be hard for them to pass up. Jacob says, were we in on Gabe Davis at all? That was a connection that made some sense, but with the wide receiver draft class and then the amount of money Gabe ended up getting in Jacksonville, that was not the Giants. That was not in the Giants' cards. Do we shop at corner now? Yeah, the Giants do have a need at corner for sure. Have to jump to Mark Sullivan, who chimes in with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Mark, so much. So Mark's setting a great example right off the bat in our chat that if you buy a super chat or a super sticker while we are talking here on the Talkin Ball live Q&A, then your comment, your opinion, your insight, your question jumps right to the top of the queue. Mark, it took me a little bit too long to get to you, frankly, so sorry about that. But thank you so much for setting the example for all our followers and listeners and the people joining our community here on the page and on the YouTube channel, which we are continuing to build. And reminder, as Jacob said at the top, hit subscribe if you hadn't already, hit those like buttons. All right, so Mark says, Pat, giving up picks makes me think round one trade down, then Knicks or JJ with a wide receiver and an interior D line or safety next. Yeah, that could be possible as well. JJ McCarthy sounds like a guy who really is going to go higher in the draft than frankly I would take him or some other people believe he should go. I think he ends up going higher. If you're picking a quarterback lower, it might end up being a guy like Michael Penix Jr. But you look at even Brian Burns coming in, a durable player, a guy who really hasn't missed many games. The Giants are super wary of injuries right now. An annual problem for them, something that reared its head badly in 2023 when they just went 6-11 there and regressed. And so injuries to me, if it was already something, which it is, that scouts are, putting as a tag on a player, something to follow up on. And Penix, for example, is a player who you talk to teams, like some teams are very scared of him despite his talent based on the injury history. But obviously recently he's been healthy and stayed healthy while at Washington. And so you have to weigh that. Every team must weigh that differently. I personally think that the Giants, especially given that Daniel Jones has the 2 neck injuries, and that's part of the reason you're looking to eventually move on from him in the first place, that's a player that, even though he is a really good player and a player that has a lot of intrigue and someone's going to take higher than all the other teams have him listed on their board. Not sure if the Giants will lean there, but we're still early in that process. Mark, I do hear you, though, which is, I think what you're addressing is the idea, especially that the Giants have a roster that has a lot of needs still, even with some of the moves they've made here. And part of Barkley and Xavier McKinney leaving and Joe Schoen investing in some of these players he did is that if you pay the running back, you pay the safety, and you're a general manager who believes you can't go too high in those markets because you don't view them as premium positions, you're managing a roster and a team that has greater needs at more important positions that aren't filled yet, right? So Barkley, really, it's a better situation for him, and it makes more sense for him to be on a team like the Eagles, where he can be somewhat closer to a finishing piece, let's say. And now there's no guarantee the Eagles are going to be all set, right? I mean, they were a disaster the second half of the year. So I'm not saying they're definitely going to win and he's definitely going to lift them over the top. I don't know that. They have a lot to fix still. They have to put more resources into their defensive line, their linebacking core. Jalen Hurts has to bounce back, etc. But the point being that, Mark, I think you're hitting on the nose that the Giants' more resources and more draft capital is something that they would like to have and need to have now to continue to replenish their roster, especially at affordable costs where, you're spending money now on some players here, Brian Burns leading the way, and you can't fill all of those slots with high-end talent. Like last year, it was Bobby Okereke and a lot of, internal free agents that they were resigning. This year, Burns is the splash. So then how can you fill in those pieces? Maybe getting more draft capital, like you said, Mark, is the way to go to help, hit some of those positions and build through the draft while still getting better for the short term as well. I think it's a smart thought. It's all going to depend, frankly, Mark, on what kind of capital you're getting to move back there, though, as well, because trading back in the draft is all well and good. But think of like the Seattle Seahawks. They're a team that trades back a lot, but they're usually drafting, high teens, early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, and they're trading back. When you have the 6th overall pick and you're a team who's in the market for a quarterback, you're not trading out of there for just anything. And you're not trading out of there with just anyone. It's got to be the right fit. And also, we learned this with the Kadarius Toney situation when Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman were here, where they ended up essentially with that trade with the Bears coming up to Justin Fields. They did get a second first-round pick that became the number 7 overall pick a year down the road. Of course, that becomes Evan Neal. But so that was good return, but they traded from 11 to 20, I believe it was, and they ended up trading out of a cluster of players there. It's often teams have players graded in clusters. It's not just one standing out on top of this one and so on all the way down. There are clusters of players they view, okay, if we're picking here, here's 3 or 4 guys we feel are worth this value, address positions of need on our roster, right? And we're comfortable with taking any of these guys. In that situation, they traded out of a cluster of those, and then Tony was next man up. A guy who proved dangerous and helped one team win a Super Bowl, but certainly wasn't what the Giants wanted in the first round, right? So to answer your question about a trade back, you have to be strategic about it too. Tuto, a loyal follower and listener and part of our community, checks in. He says, massive salutes and respects to Big Boss Pat and all Giants diehard fans in America. Please slap all stinky birds, losers out there and say we forget about it. So Tuto, our friend, is one of the most supportive Giants fans here on the channel, checks in with another $5 super chat there. Tuto, thanks so much. We appreciate you always setting the example here and really being someone who brings people to the channel to talk about Giants, to talk and listen, Tuto's been here for some of these conversations where we like going back and forth. We like disagreement. Fans sometimes on here are frustrated with what they see from the team. Fans sometimes here don't view things the same way I do. And then we kind of bat it back and forth to see where it comes out, maybe why you're coming from that perspective and why I'm coming from another one. But I love the dialogue, and Tuto's somebody who constantly gets us going here. And Tuto, I really do appreciate you checking in with the support, and also a timely shot at Eagles fans and the Birds, considering that Saquon Barkley signs with the Philadelphia Eagles, and also sets off as a firestorm here with Tiki Barber, saying that Saquon's dead to us here in New York and New Jersey, and then Saquon letting Tiki have it on X, on social media, saying he's always been a hater and he's essentially loyal to the team over the player, and calling him out for being a company man. So it's already right. Tempers are flaring here in the tri-state area, and it's been a long and crazy day. But let's just sum it up for you guys real quick. I know most of you here probably know already, but if you don't, Saquon Barkley to the Philadelphia Eagles, 3 years, $37.75 million, $26 million guaranteed. He has a chance to get up to $46.75 million in the deal with incentives. That would get him, if he reached all those incentives, up to over $15 million a year. Obviously, the Giants did offer a contract in the range of that 12.5 range, up to $13 million a year at one point during negotiations last year. Major problem, though, was the guaranteed money and also the leaks that made it seem like he was being offered more than he actually was, which was something that Saquon did not take, that he resented, that frustrated him. And I think even though he did a really good job of being diplomatic about carrying his way through the season as a leader for the Giants team, he didn't forget how that was handled. And in the end, I think that's a part of the reason why he wasn't looking at this as, oh, I shouldn't sign with the Eagles, it's a Giants rival or whatever it was. This was about making a good business decision for him. Though I think undeniably, it is impossible to look at this not as a indictment of Saquon's opinion of the Giants' direction and their current regime, because you choose the Eagles, right? You choose the Eagles over the Giants. Saquon knows what that means and did it anyway. Of course, like I said, it's about him and it's a personal decision. But to me, that was something that really spoke volumes in Barkley's decision-making here in choosing the Eagles. C-Note 6319, backs up his name. C-Note comes in with $5 on the super sticker, the super chat. Again, that's a way for you guys to support and have your questions, comments, opinions addressed immediately, jumping to the top of the queue. I'm getting to everybody in the queue, so don't worry, I won't skip you. But we appreciate the support for what we do here on the podcast and on these Talkin Ball live chats. I told you guys last time when we did our free agency preview, this is one of my favorite things. I look forward to these twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. We have been doing Mondays at noon and Thursdays at 9 p.m., but we're doing this as a special prime time event, Monday night of NFL free agency first day. And as you guys saw, it was a whirlwind of a day. So C-Note says, Any idea what the Giants might do to replace Xavier McKinney? Well, they do have Dane Belton in the organization already. He is a guy who has proven that he makes plays on the ball on the back end. He's a draft pick. He's homegrown. Now, granted, McKinney was too, but Dane Belton on an affordable contract, a guy you have in the building, a leader, someone who Jerome Henderson, the Giants secondary coach, and I believe defensive passing game coordinator now, he has told me multiple times that Dane Belton is one of the smartest players that he has ever coached. Like he has said it multiple times. It's almost like when one coach says that, a lot of times you hear that and you say, well, that sounds like something a coach would say just to pump a player up to the media, right? He doesn't want to say anything negative, or he's just trying to say the right things, and that's what he says. But when you hear a coach say it 3 or 4 times and cite 3 or 4 different examples of why, and describe plays he's adjusted to, and what he has done on the back end that you might not notice while you're watching the games, it really stands out to me. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to go get help, sign somebody in free agency. I don't know if, a guy like Cam Curl, he's an intriguing player, but I think he's more likely a player who gets some pretty good money with a good team that's looking to add him into the fold. Like a team like the Chiefs, I think would be an interesting team for Curl. And I'm not saying the Chiefs are going to sign him, but what I'm saying is, a team that values players and can see where he would fit in their system and elevate with better players around him, right? Like I think, and that might just be out of the Giants' price range. I do think though they're going to look at that. They're continuing to look at the veteran safety market. They know that they're going to need to add experience, right, on the back end behind Bobby Okereke and that defensive front. But they do love Belton, Jason Pinnock's there as well, an athletic player, that 2 safety combo. So I think what you do now is you look at the remaining safeties, you look at some bargains potentially, and a way that you can spend on safety, let's say the way you did on Devin Singletary at running back, where you're getting a good player, but just not for top of the market money. Give you some more names there when they come to me. It might even happen while we're on this chat. Greg Simon checking in with $5 as well. Thank you, Greg. Greg says, I admit it, I've never heard of Runyon. What do you think of the player and the pick? Greg, well, here's what I'll tell you. The Giants play the Dallas Cowboys twice a year, right? And the Giants watched, and we watched, as the Green Bay Packers ran the ball down the Cowboys' throats in the playoffs on the road. Now, of course, Runyon was one of 5 players involved, right? The Green Bay Packers did that as a team. But they're getting a guy who, first of all, grades out pretty well as a pass protector on the interior. That's the number one priority here, right? The priority here is protecting the interior, making sure your quarterback, Daniel Jones, the rookie you get, the veteran backup you sign, making sure that guy's not under constant pressure. And so tackle is always thought of as important there. But for the Giants, right now, they need to solidify the interior because too often, too many breakdowns there, too many breakdowns inside. John Michael Schmitz was a rookie center who went through some growing pains. So adding a guy with experience who comes from an offense where he was well coached and his offense performed at a high level last season, has proven that he's strong in pass pro, I think is a smart value, a smart attempt at a value add for the Giants. Now, the question is, though, and we don't know the answer to this yet, they didn't spend higher into the guard market for Jonah Jackson, who goes to the Rams, $17 million a year. Robert Hunt from the Dolphins, $20 million a year. These guys out on the market, available for really clear, it turns out of the Giants' price range. So what we have to wait and see is, did Joe Schoen calculate correctly to spend more on the pass rusher and, kind of have it with the offensive guard? Or would it have been more prudent for him to go all out and splash big money on one of those offensive guards and still continue to try to go into the middle ground at pass rusher. I still think it's interesting that they spent that much, I know the draft capital comes in much lower on Burns than what the Panthers originally turned down in 2022 from the Rams. It was 2 firsts and a second that they turned down a couple years ago for Brian Burns. And now they're taking a second, a fifth, and a 5th-round pick swap. I mean, talk about a huge difference, right? But the Giants paying $30 million a year for a guy, $87 million guaranteed. I did think Danielle Hunter was going to be in on that mix. I know as a player they like, but I do think Brian Burns' age is a factor there as well. But to answer your question on Runyon, I think I like the process there, right? And that's one thing I always say about Joe Schoen. Like, I like a lot of Joe's process as a general manager. Like, you can ask him why he did something, and almost always his answer is rooted in a process of how they evaluate the market, gauge free agents, gauge them against the future years, guys who are going to be available, and all of that. And even the market that was coming in and the competition they had for certain guys. And frankly, the competition for offensive linemen on the interior this year was sky high, and the guard market exploded. So that all went into that. All right, let's get back up to the top. Thank you. That was a great run there. Thank you, Greg. But thank you, all of you, for those super chats and those super stickers. Remember, if you drop those, if you pay for a super chat or super sticker, your question, opinion, or comment gets addressed immediately. All right. So Jacob says, if May and Daniels are there at 6, do you go generational receiver with Marvin Harrison Jr. or quarterback? Daniels will not be there at 6. And if it's the quarterback, you go May. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a stud, though, but I don't think they're going to have to make that decision, Jacob. I don't think, frankly, any of those 3 players are going to be available at their pick. Michael Knight says, to quote Ice Cube, today was a good day. All right, Michael, glad you're happy. Let's see. Jacob wants to know if the Giants offered Russell Wilson. No, they talked. Russell was looking at a situation where he'd be coming in to compete no matter where he was, New York, Pittsburgh. I've seen reports that the Giants viewed him as a backup. I personally did not believe, like, if Russell Wilson signed in New York, you can't tell me the second Daniel Jones and the offense went 3 and out in week 1 that people wouldn't be banging the tables for Russell Wilson. Like, it wouldn't last a day. In training camp, if he outperformed Daniel Jones and we were all writing he was outperforming Daniel Jones, it wouldn't last a day. I think those exploratory talks made sense from a post-career perspective as well. Wilson and the Giants have been tied to each other as far as interest before. And also, it is a very real thing that the Giants have to now plan for a potential future without Daniel Jones, through the draft, through free agent signings, whatever the case may be. But no, it was not the case of choosing one offer over another. My understanding, he went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so it was talks with the Giants, and then it was talks, meetings, contract with the Steelers is how I viewed it. Tuto checks in with another $5. Thank you so much, Tuto. He says, Big Boss Pat, please suit me up in Giants gear next season. I promise you. There won't be any O-line or QBs leaving the pitch on their own power, mate. Everybody with a Giants uniform needs the attitude of Tuto on the field. A rugby player, hard-nosed. We all know those rugby players. They're a little different, right? There's tough, there's hockey tough, there's football tough, and there's rugby tough. But certainly that's the kind of player you want with the Giants, right? That's one thing I hear about Brian Burns. He's a guy, he's all business. He's going to put his head down and work. He's got a motor like no other. So I think you should be excited about having him in Giants blue. But you want those dogs, right? And I know I mention these guys a lot, but it's because there's a quality of offensive linemen that I think you really want. And, the guys like Nick Gates and John Feliciano, they're not here anymore. Gates a free agent now again. But you want guys who I refer to lovingly as dogs, right? Like guys who just have that attitude where they're going to make the other team pay for hitting the quarterback late. They're going to get you the 2 hard yards on 3rd and 1, whatever it is. So those are the qualities you're looking for sure. All right. And Jacob says, out of curiosity, is it true Sauce was Shane's number 1 player in the 2022 draft? All I know is if he was still on the board, the Giants would take him. That's what I know. Hunter says, was a good day. I don't like the absolute hate for Saquon. You can't hate on a guy for taking more money, plus staying close to home more than football sometimes. Yeah, Hunter, that's a really good measured take, I think, on Saquon. And I think it is wrong to point a finger. Think of it this way. If the Giants can privately, let's say, in their minds, be out on Daniel Jones and starting to plan for the future, as has been reported, then why can't Saquon, when he's free, go choose another team that wants to pay him and use him like the running back and dual threat and versatile weapon that he believes he is, right? More than ever now in the NFL, it is a situation where players know their worth. They know the market. And the bottom line is teams are going to throw these guys to the curb the second they feel like they're not worth it. Even look at last year when the Giants said, listen, if you don't take this deal, we're going to franchise tag you. And this is the face of their franchise, their most important offensive player. And yet what happened? He doesn't take the deal. They follow through on that threat, but it ends up essentially creating issues for a full calendar year until Barkley heads elsewhere. Just telling people on X right now that we are talking Saquon Barkley and his fit with the Eagles and how he came to leave the Giants live on YouTube now. So I'm telling all the fans here on social media to come join us because we're cooking right now. You guys are really turning this into a vibrant chat. We've been adding more followers to the mix every week. And just so you know, guys, I do the podcast here. It's the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast. So anytime we have a special guest, like we had Xavier McKinney on right before the start of free agency, we had Justin Pugh on recently. We're going to have a great lineup of NFL draft experts and Giants related content and NFL wide, talking about the top quarterbacks, top receivers, and whatever the case may be, breaking down the top of the draft, experts from all over the National Football League coming to the podcast. So those are on video here on the channel. Also on YouTube Shorts, you can find a lot of my news breaks, player analysis, and breakdowns on YouTube Shorts. So if you subscribe here, you're going to get all of that and more. All right, just posting this on X. We were talking Saquon Barkley and his fit with the Eagles and how he came to leave the Giants live on YouTube, plus Brian Burns and Xavier McKinney and more. All right, let's get to the next question. Mark says, Phil Simms, who is usually spot on with quarterback, loves them both. I think you're talking about JJ and Penix. Yeah, good players. I think JJ could use a year of development. That's part of the reason why he seems intriguing for the Giants is that the Giants look like a team. They've talked about being the kind of team that wants to play Daniel Jones this year, bringing a veteran to support him, given the health concerns and the performance concerns, but then also have a quarterback developing behind the guys you already have in the building. You know, in New York, that's hard to do, especially if you're drafting a guy number 6 overall. Very hard to do. But McCarthy does fit that mold, and also the Giants' interest so far has fit that mold. Hunter says, 2 starting linemen and an elite edge rusher. Yeah, no, Joe Schoen showed today that he wants to put his resources and money into his offensive and defensive fronts rather than paying at safety and running back. As far as gauging what positions are premium versus where you can find value and still get, comparable production, that makes a lot of sense, like I said, from a process standpoint. Also out of necessity, right? So last year, the Giants offensive line was, again, as it has been so many other times in recent years, their Achilles heel. So Joe Schoen has no choice this offseason but to make the offensive line a priority, the priority, right? And then as far as pass rush goes, it's a new defensive scheme. And so throw out that, obviously Shane's talked about didn't matter that we're going from, 3-4 to 4-3 and all that, but that does matter and have an effect on the Giants' actions in free agency, because with a four-man front, you really want and need, with more zone coverage behind them, that other edge rusher opposite Kayvon Thibodeau, with Dexter Lawrence and a rotation in the middle. And so that position became more premium in this scheme with Shane Bowen as defensive coordinator now as well. But of course, you guys know, I mean, you're here, so I don't have to tell you. But when the Giants win, when they've won historically, they have done it with a great pass rush, right? They've done it with defense and a great pass rush. Of course, Eli Manning and the heroics and all that. But the bottom line is the Giants hang their hat as a franchise, their tradition, what they stand for on the defense, on getting after the quarterback, on LT, right? On the Justin Tucks of the world, JPP, Osi Umenyiora, those guys. And so Brian Burns, getting him shoots a charge a little bit into the fan base from the perspective of, you lose Saquon Barkley and that hurts. You lose him to the Eagles, and man, that hurts even more. But Brian Burns lets you go to sleep tonight if you're a Giants fan, recognizing that, there is a plan in place to reallocate these resources and take things in a certain direction. Tuto checks in again with another $5. My man, he says, I'll never be able to play in the NFL if a player's not wearing the same color jersey on the pitch. He's going down hard and fast, and he's not getting up no more. And I can promise you, one thing I'm really interested in is hearing Dexter Lawrence talk about facing Saquon Barkley. That was something I thought of right away when I saw Saquon signing with the Eagles, is Dex versus Saquon, right? It's not 1v1, but man, oh man, it's going to feel like it at times in that rivalry twice a year in division. It's going to be fascinating to watch. All right, let's see. Hunter says, what money do we have left? Still waiting for all that to sort out, Hunter, because, for example, Brian Burns' contract, we know the general terms of it, but we're going to learn as it trickles out, as we continue to talk to people here, where is the money kicked down into the future? How much is kicked into the future? So Burns' cap hit this year could be, very low as they stack money into the future on that extension that he received from the Giants. And so the first year salary cap will affect what they have available to spend now. And that's something that the Giants are going to play with to make sure they can fit enough players and talent into their 2024 roster in order to compete, because Shane keeps calling this a rebuild and saying this needs to be a long-term thing. And that was the plan coming in, and that's what you needed to be to sustain success. But the Giants are in a position where Brian Daboll's under some pressure here, a lot of pressure. Joe Shane's under some pressure, and they were under even more pressure watching the face of their franchise walk out of the building for nothing, right? So yeah, we'll get those numbers to you when we have them. Let's see. Hunter says about Saquon, people are quick to forget Saquon was our Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee. Most of the people bashed him, probably never worked a second at a food shelter or anything like that. Yeah, it's just important to see the big picture, right? Important to see the big picture. Let's see. No Mets is in the house. What's up? Ken in Wisconsin. How you doing? Intel says this team has gotten a lot better. We just need a quarterback. Okay. And as I go to the Cabernet, go to your glasses as well. All right. So Intel says this team has gotten a lot better. We just need a quarterback. Well, they certainly have allocated more resources into their fronts, which I think is extremely important because, frankly, whatever the Giants felt they had in certain positions on their roster last year weren't able to thrive and show themselves as they would have hoped, because they either couldn't block or couldn't stop the run, right? Couldn't block on offense well enough, couldn't stop the run well enough on defense. Didn't have the same kind of talent, especially once you trade Leonard Williams at the deadline, of course. Look at Joe Shane trading Leonard Williams at the deadline of what was essentially a lost season for a second and a fifth. Then a second and a fifth goes to Carolina in the Brian Burns deal, right? Now, in hindsight, it would have been the right thing to do that with Saquon Barkley too. But the Giants were also working with a really tough situation where Brian Daboll and the coaches, that situation's not going well. The team's losing. The offense, they scored, what was it, like one combined touchdown in their first 5 losses or something like that. And so they were hanging on by a thread morale-wise. And so keeping Saquon Barkley, frankly, was motivated in part by just like getting to the end of last season. And to me, like if the Giants, if they weren't in such an unstable spot then you do trade that player. But also remember, like this just wasn't another guy. Like it's easy to say you lost a running back and we got better, but he was the well-rounded face of the franchise, leader of the locker room type guy. Players had his back. He had theirs. Now, Intel, I do agree with you that in theory, I would rather invest my money in a pass rusher and in the offensive line, in proven veterans on the offensive front, than a skill player who isn't 24 years old, right? But we will see how the Giants then stack their weapons on offense to replace Saquon, because right now, Devin Singletary comes in on a 3-year contract. I believe it's at $5.5 million a year. And he comes from the Houston Texans, where had an excellent season. He's a 3-down back. I talked to some people today about him, a 3-down running back. He can help you in the pass game. He can help you in the running game. So those are 2 really good things. The Giants were taking Saquon off the field often on 3rd down, not using him as much as a pass catcher, which he wanted to be used more there. Singletary, more of a 3-down back, familiarity with the coach and the general manager. But also, does he replace the ability of Barkley to take over games, right? Like Saquon didn't do it all the time, but look at some of the games that the Giants have won the last couple years, right? You have the Texans game last year. You have the Bears game last year. Think of the Jets game this past season when the Giants lose, but they essentially, Tyrod Taylor gets hurt, Tommy DeVito comes in, it's pouring rain. Brian Daboll refuses to throw the ball because of the conditions, the QB being put in that spot. And so Saquon Barkley essentially just carries the Giants offense through the course of that day and really should have won them the game. They get to 4th and 1, and Daboll tries to kick a field goal with an injured kicker instead of when he's already missed from there already, rather than giving Saquon a chance to get 1 more yard and end the game. But my point is, you don't have now the dominant player in Saquon that you did have. That was the focal point of your offense, the guy you leaned on when you needed things the most. He was the, gotta have it guy, right? Think of the Washington game, 2 touchdowns as a receiver, right? 2 touchdowns in the Minnesota game, like as well as Daniel Jones played in the Minnesota playoff game. Saquon didn't have this breakout, crazy, oh my God, doing everything type game. But you know what he did do? He got the ball in the end zone twice. Like that's one thing that Daniel Jones really struggles with. He moves the ball between the 20s often. One thing he doesn't do as well, though, is get the ball in the end zone. And what matters more? And that's what Saquon was doing for the Giants the last 2 years. And so that brings me around to when you say the team has gotten better, they've invested more in their fronts, which they haven't done a good enough job of doing. But can they replace the production on offense? If you draft a rookie wide receiver, can he immediately become the explosive, dynamic, game-changing force he needs to be as your number 6 overall pick? It's a lot of pressure on a rookie, right? It's not going to be the only other piece you add. You have Wan'Dale Robinson, you have Jalen Hyatt. These are guys who can grow, right? But you're right. You do have to steady the quarterback position. Daniel says, hey, Pat, great day to be a New York Giants fan. What's our next move? Darius Williams. I think there's some other good fits for Darius Williams out there as well. He has a market, but corner definitely a position to watch for the Giants as well. opposite Deonte Banks, who they took in the first round last year. Reminder, if anybody has a question that you want answered immediately, you can hit me with a super chat or a super sticker, so you can pay money to have your comment elevated to the top of the queue, and I will answer it or address it first. Going to continue to talk to you guys more here about everything you're asking about, but soon I want to get back into the Saquon Barkley stuff, because anyone who's here who's either from Philadelphia, an Eagles fan, or a Giants fan, very curious about the Saquon Barkley situation in particular. I want to get to all the details of kind of what happened there with Saquon as well. Brian says, "Hey, Pat, why are you late? It's not like you were busy today or anything." Yeah, I mean, I think 2 minutes late, man. Maybe, Brian, I think I was getting my numbers together too, right? All the contract numbers, trying to make sure that when I'm telling you guys what a guy got per year, what's guaranteed, what's not, that I have all my ducks in a row there. And then, like I said, all the revolving doors of trying to discuss with people about what's coming next, right? So all of that's what I'm focused on. But we're here now, baby. We're here now. Joshua says quarterback or wide receiver in the first round. There's a good chance. Bandit says Burns, baby Burns. I like it. Daniel says another question. Do you think Illuminor is coming here to be the starter? If so, what happens to Evan Neal? Illuminor, if he beats Evan Neal out, would be the starter. But all my indications are that Evan Neal is going to get one more chance to lock down that right tackle job that they drafted him number 7 overall to take and win and play. And that Illuminor he's going to be the guy there to compete with him, and also to be a stronger swing tackle presence who can back those guys up in case of injury, or also replace Neal if he starts to struggle. Frankly, I still think that in the end, there's a good chance that Illuminor ends up as their starting right tackle and Neal gets kicked into guard. That was something that Justin Pugh and I talked about at length on our podcast, the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast on the Believe Network a couple weeks ago. So I still think there's a good chance it ends up there, but my understanding is it's not starting there. And so Illuminor provides them insurance in both spots. Dan says, don't mind the Giants letting Saquon walk. It just sucks he signed with our arch rival. Glad the saga is finally over, though. I think it was time to move on for both parties. Yeah, it really did feel like that, Dan. We're going to get right to that in a second. I see a super chat come in, so I'm going to jump to that, and I'm going to come right back to that comment. John checks in with $5. Thank you so much, John. John says, any updates on Darren Waller? How long is Joe Shane willing to wait for him to decide? And are the Giants looking to sign another linebacker? So Waller, he told Dan Duggan from The Athletic in his interview that he wasn't going to make a decision before the start of free agency. If you're Joe Shane and the Giants, that means that you have to prepare for Darren Waller not to be back. That doesn't mean he's not going to be, but you and I both know that running a business, if you can't count on that asset, then you can't plan for him to be in the cards. Now, the Giants aren't going to, force a guy's hand in that situation. He's obviously reflecting on what he should do. And so it's going to happen in his time. You can't force it. But from the Giants' end, Waller is a mature enough person to know, and I'm saying I know he is, he's a mature enough person to know that his decisions or his indecision affects where the Giants move. So they're in the tight end market. Not only do they need to replace him if he retires, but they need to add, to me, at least 2 tight ends to their roster with what they have right now, especially if Waller leaves. So we don't know for sure what's happening with Darren yet, but I think his timeline indicates that he is aware the Giants have to at least plan for life without him. And so that's the direction I lean in what ends up happening, is that he ends up moving on, but we will see. Dan Hegeman says, don't mind the Giants letting Barkley walk. Just sucks he signed with our arch rival. Right. So getting right back to Dan's comment and Saquon's situation. So Saquon, fascinatingly, last year, Saquon Barkley and the Eagles, that was a match that could have happened a year ago. The Eagles were one of the teams, I talked to sources this past week, They were one of the teams who were interested in Saquon last year if he had gotten to the market. And that was one reason. Obviously, players don't want to be tagged. They want to hit the market. That was one reason Saquon was frustrated last year, getting tagged right there at that deadline when Daniel Jones gets paid. It's like, forget about Jones getting paid and not him. It's also the idea of, well, wait a second, people talk and you get to that point and you know that there's a few teams that are probably going to come calling and you're interested in seeing what they're going to offer or what they're going to put on the table to prove what you're worth. And frankly, a year ago, Saquon, I think, was more likely interested in gauging his value on the open market and genuinely bringing it back to the Giants and saying, hey, man, I don't want to leave New York. I want to be a Giant for life, right? Like, I want to be here. I want to be in this market. I want to be with this team. I want to be with the franchise that believed in me and drafted me number 2 overall with a former GM who called me a generational talent, right? Just pay me a little bit more to what this team is offering. But when the Giants didn't give him that chance, that kind of set the ball rolling in the direction it headed. And then obviously, if you haven't read before about this or seen the videos, you can actually see it on our channel here. I have a full interview with Saquon Barkley from his kids camp last summer. And that was the camp where Saquon essentially came out of the silence because he hadn't said much throughout the offseason while staying away from the Giants facility. And he vented a lot of his frustrations with the running back market, with his situation, with how things were being handled. He actually, during that interview, praised the Eagles as a team with a tremendous amount of talent, mentioned Jalen Hurts by name. Also remember, as a rookie, he talked about growing up in Eastern Pennsylvania in the Lehigh Valley area around a ton of Eagles fans and how a lot of his friends growing up were Eagles fans. Remember, this is also a guy with a family here. He has put roots down, back here on the East Coast, a Penn State guy, Bronx born, grew up in Eastern PA, now lives here in New Jersey. And so, Philadelphia, not too far, familiar, but really for Saquon, it was about a combination of everything, wanting to win, wanting to get paid compensatory to his value, what he felt he was valued and worth, but also the ability to be used as a dynamic weapon in the pass game and in the run game. And Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore intend to use Barkley that way. They believe he can be that Christian McCaffrey type back type weapon, right? And so that's why the contract comes in higher than Josh Jacobs, much higher than a Tony Pollard or a DeAndre Swift, because they view him as more than just a back. And that's what Saquon was looking for in the end. Of course, like I said, I don't think it ever truly it was almost like forgive but not forget for Barkley, that last year with the Giants negotiations, he resented that the Giants would consistently say to him, family business is family business. In other words, what we say doesn't leave these walls. And then he started seeing leaks that he was looking for and standing and holding out for $16 million a year average. And he was seeing leaks that more guaranteed money was on the table than actually was. And that's when he posted the cap tweet. And he came out at that camp, last summer. And again, you can watch the video here on our channel at PL on NFL on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard channel from last summer. And he came out and said that these leaks were misleading. They were untruthful. They made him look greedy. And he goes, you say family business is family business. And then I see all these things out there that aren't true and they're not coming from me. And so that really didn't sit well with Saquon. It surprised everybody, including me, that he didn't hold out at all from training camp. That was super interesting. Part of the reason he ends up getting this deal this year and handling things differently, not only because of what he went through last year, but also he changed agents coming off of last year, where some of the Giants' earlier deals, if they could get the guaranteed money up a little bit more, they were deals that on the table then and there would have been, pretty good deals for him to just accept to stay in New York. But once he didn't take them and then the leaks started happening and he got tagged and all of that, it ended up just being something that neither party could put a stop to. And then coming this year, I think from Joe Shane's standpoint and the Giants' standpoint, there's a little bit of franchise tag fatigue, right? You look at Xavier McKinney saying he didn't want the tag, don't tag me. You saw Barkley, you knew what Barkley didn't want. In fact, the plan here all along was for the Giants to essentially let Barkley hit the market and for him to come back to them and say, here's the deal. Would you match it? And they say yes or no. But everybody knew that when the Giants were starting to tell people at the NFL Combine that they didn't see any value in paying a running back $10 million in free agency, you knew what that meant, right? Now, maybe they would have spent a little bit more, considered spending a little bit more for a guy like Saquon Barkley as a face of the franchise, but it told you they were never really in the market to begin with. And so the numbers that the Eagles came in on, the Giants weren't matching that. Bandit says Justin Simmons, a possibility for the Giants. That's tough. I mean, I know he got released, but Justin Simmons, a very good player with serious pedigree at that position. So, that's about value for Joe Schoen at that position. Like, he has now let two safeties walk in free agency, Julian Love and Xavier McKinney. Julian Love got less money than he thought on the open market. Xavier McKinney got bank, right? $17 million a year on a 4-year contract. Happy for Xavier, happy for X. Really, really appreciated him coming on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast. In fact, in the month of February, we did our record amount of views for the YouTube channel, thanks to all of your guys' support here and also to McKinney and to Pew joining us. So really appreciated that. Chronicles, what's up, Giants? Chronicles, another loyal follower, says the secondary is where we turn next, I think. Anything you have on how the visit went with Darius Williams? Any interest in possibly signing another offensive weapons additions? No, all I know is that Williams has more of a market than just the Giants. So not sure that's definitely going to happen, but we'll see on that, and I'll keep you apprised. Evan Neal moving to guard, or is Jermaine playing guard? I think most likely, Jermaine will play tackle. I think Evan Neal, ends up moving to guard most likely, but he'll start competing at tackle. Dan says, gotta like what Schoen is trying to do with the moves made today. Clearly trying to build from the inside out, which is the right way to build a roster. Just need to get our quarterback in the draft. And if you can hit on a top end free agent every year, like one a year, and you have a few years running, like Bobby Okereke last year, really good signing, right? If Burns turns out to be worth, listen, it's hard to be worth $30 million a year. So you have Daniel Jones on the hook for $40 million a year and Brian Burns on the hook for $30 million a year. I mean, I know the NFL salary cap is skyrocketing, but geez. But, bottom line is if you hit on one of those big guys every year, now you just got to be pretty smart about how you supplement it. But those things matter. Like getting big time stars in the building matters. Super Unknown says, hey, Pat, what a trade. Yeah, no, it looks like good value picks wise. You lose, though, that high second rounder. Obviously, the Giants factor in what they felt like they could get in that high second round as well. But to me, it's the contract that stands out to me more than anything. What a blockbuster contract that is. Luann is pissed that Saquon and McKinney are gone. Luann, one of our most loyal and optimistic Giants fans. And so I think Luann's speaking especially to the sentiment some fans have where essentially no matter whether you like some of the players coming in or not, sometimes it's really hard to see people go, especially guys where they're captains of the team. They're guys who you have their jersey, right? Like how many people on here have a Saquon Barkley jersey that they don't know what to do with other than save for 5 or 6 years and say, hey, remember when, check out this throwback, right? It's a really strange situation. Hunter says we should just throw the Bears a bone, maybe a fifth or something for Fields. Yeah, it's interesting. The Giants still poking around in that market. Fields seems like a really good fit for the Eagles to me, but we'll see where that goes. William says Barkley took money today, not planning post-football in New York media. Who's saying that he couldn't come back into the media? I mean, you don't have to be in the New York media to be in the media, right? Like Saquon sees himself as national, and he's got a big-time brand. So, this isn't going to prevent that. Like, for example, think he wants to go into being an analyst, and he's doing well at it. You don't think Amazon or NBC or, somebody's not going to put him on? You think like leaving the Giants is going to prevent that, right? Like he'll be fine with that. C Note says, any thoughts on what we already talked about that. Let's see. Some of you guys like Michael Penix Jr. a lot. Let's see. Hunter says, I like Michael Penix a lot, but drafting him is an oxymoron, especially replacing an injured QB with an injured QB. He's one of the most fascinating players in the draft to me. I do think he ends up going in the first round. It'll be interesting though, because his injury history is such a key critical element. Maybe it ends up pushing him to the second round, but boy, what a talent he is. And he can help somebody right away. Scorpio says, love the John Runyon Jr. pickup. Let's go. We need a bulldog at running back, also a veteran corner. Mike says, perfect example. The Eagles, like 49ers, the running back was the finishing piece. Giants are a year or two away from a finishing piece. Mike, very well said. Yes, a team like the Eagles believes they can get back to needing that finishing piece. The Niners seem like they're already there. That's where the Christian McCaffrey trade came in, right, from Carolina. That's a really good example, comparison, and a difference in where these two teams are. I think that's well said. Bandit says, spent $5 and no one knows what he said. Oh, oh, Bandit, you're hating on Tudo? No, I translated it for you. Don't worry about it. All right, let's see. Jacob says the Kadarius Toney deal took the Giants took away Micah Parsons and Rashawn Slater, etc. Yeah, the Parsons one, I still scratch my head on that. I mean, basically, the Giants just weren't going to take him. Off-field concerns, etc. That's one I just shake my head at. The Micah Parsons essentially, off the board at that spot type thinking. I don't get it. Let's see. By the way, how about Parsons saying sickening in reaction to Saquon signing with the Eagles? I thought that was really, really appropriate reaction. And I think it spoke to, again, going off of who was just saying this? Mike was just talking about where teams are. That was a player on the Cowboys who knows that, the Cowboys and Eagles are the heavyweights in the division right now. And that was him, laughing at, essentially Barkley sticking it to the Giants a little bit, but more, he was also commenting on it's sickening to see a team like the Eagles that has a lot of talent and that he knows he's going to have to battle for the division, adding a player like Barkley. That's also a guy he's friends with, right? So they're good friends, both Penn State products. So, really interesting seeing the reaction. Obviously, Kayvon Thibodeau also came out, essentially saying like, God, this is tough to take, right? As a teammate, a guy who loves Saquon and wants him to get paid, but understands what they're losing with him leaving. Brett, what's going on? Tuto bringing the attitude. Love it. Dan says Tiki Barber knows all about being hated by a fan base. That's true. Bandit says, burn my Barkley jersey. I'm the one who posted the video. No, you didn't. Bandit, you burned your jersey. You really burned your jersey? Is it the same handle on X? Oh my goodness. I'll go find it and share it if you want, but I can't support that, I gotta say, I mean, burning the jersey? Come on, man. Do you burn the jersey because you feel like he shouldn't have signed with the Eagles and that reflects that he was never like a true Giant to begin with? Is that your thinking there? Michael says, how the hell is Tiki Barber a hater? Well, so what Barkley was referring to there, Michael, so that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. So Tiki Barber said that Saquon is dead to me, dead to us. Saquon fired back on X and said, you're loyal to the team, not the player. I was just getting more guaranteed money, doing what was best for me. If people want to hate me, so be it. You're a hater anyways. Don't smile when you see me, right? When he said he was a hater, if you remember when Saquon was really struggling as a pass protector, especially early in his career, right? It's never been his strength. He's worked on it. It's never been his strength. But early on, it was costing the Giants in some big spots. And Tiki Barber was the harshest critic of Saquon and his pass protecting and needing to stick his nose in there and, kind of put Saquon on blast a little bit when he was young. And Saquon heard it, didn't love it. Barber wasn't wrong in his scouting report at the time of what Saquon needed to do better. But the way he said it, the fact that he's a former Giant, a guy who's loyal to the team, only played for the Giants, Saquon can hear where it's coming from and didn't appreciate it and didn't forget it. What's interesting to me, though, and I think what Saquon's also talking about is Barber essentially after that kind of switched gears and started publicly turning into a Saquon supporter, eventually, like over the back half of Saquon's career as a Giant, like really supporting him, sounding like one of his friends, someone who was loyal to Saquon, who had his back, right? There are guys who was Saquon chasing him and catching him in certain places in the record books. And so from Saquon's vantage point, he's seeing a guy who he saw kind of go after him early, switch gears and act like he was on his side. But then when the chips were down and Saquon signed with another team in the division with the Philadelphia Eagles, it's like, oh, you're showing your true colors. This is who you were all along, right? And I do think Saquon's pointing out in a fair way, like there are people in every market in the media, like a former player of that team criticizing a current player for leaving that team. It's like you're doing the team's work by doing that, and you're chastising the player for doing something wrong to your team. And frankly, and this doesn't go for the Giants, it's just like most teams, like I don't think that's the way to go. I think that teams do what's best for them, and so players need to do what's best for them as well. I think players take more heat as individuals often for doing what's best for them than the teams do, because fans are loyal to the jersey more often than they are loyal to the individual. That's, so I agree with Saquon there. Let's see. We have another super chat coming in. Peter says, do you think we restructure Andrew Thomas or Dexter or both? I don't think we are finished in free agency. Do you? No, the Giants are not finished in free agency. They need a corner. They're in the tight end market. I did actually not answer. Somebody else earlier mentioned, are the Giants in the linebacker market? They do need to reinforce the linebacker market as well. Bobby Okereke is there. Micah McFadden's there. But again, you're working with a different type of personnel now in the 4-3. Shane Bowen can play some multiple at times, but it's more zone-based. You're going to want another outside linebacker. I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants, first of all, they re-signed Carter Coughlin, right? Carter Coughlin's a guy who I thought showed a lot on defense in the preseason last year, didn't play a lot during the regular season. I think he's extremely eager to get a chance at proving he can do that in the regular season. And the fact that he re-signed with the Giants shows me that he feels he's going to get that chance here. He is a special teams ace, but the fact that Carter re-signed with the Giants tells me that Shane Bowen's system is going to give him a chance to play as an every down linebacker in that 4-3. We'll see if that happens. But I do know that Carter really wants to, spread his wings, so to speak, and felt like, hey, I put this on tape in the preseason and then the regular season came and I wasn't on the field with the defense. Let's do it. We'll see if that's the case, but I still think they have to reinforce that position. Carter's there, McFadden's there with Okereke, but the Giants still have to be in the depth linebacker, outside linebacker market, but not the outside linebackers like we've been working with on the edge. Now we have Kayvon and Brian Burns as the edges in the 4-3, and now you're talking about those linebackers behind them. Chronicles checks in with a $2 super sticker, saying we need to add playmakers. Ridley, cap space right now. Still waiting on the cap space numbers because we have to know the exact details of the deals. Have more clarity on that on Tuesday here of free agency and on Wednesday as the actual contracts come in, because we know the full terms right now of these contracts, but we don't know all of their exact breakdowns from year to year, right? And so from year to year, you have to gauge how much money do they kick down the road to free space now. The Giants certainly do need to add more playmakers, though. Ridley, they were in the wide receiver market. They did check in on Mike Evans early. That's obviously the top of the wide receiver market. So Joe Shane has proven he's not going to leave any stone unturned. But to me, Ridley's a guy who would get some money, like some real money. That would be interesting to me if the Giants were actually going to spend for a wide receiver like that. But wouldn't rule anything out. But that would not be my top thought at the moment, especially with them possibly going wide receiver at 6. But we'll see. I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, they're checking in on the wide receivers. Quick sip of wine there, and let's get some more questions. You guys are great tonight. Thank you so much. We've been over 200, well, for a lot of the time, 230 viewers consistently throughout this whole chat. Really crushing it here. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support. Really appreciate it. Remember, we do these on Mondays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. on Thursdays. A lot of times we end up doing noon on Mondays, but I think a lot of people do like the evenings better. So we could end up making the Monday night special prime time a regular thing as well. But we do these and we typically go about an hour and a half. Started out going like 30, 40 minutes and it's blossomed and ballooned into something bigger, and can't thank you guys enough. And if you miss anything we've talked about here, we post this audio on the Believe Network, on the YouTube feed, but also on the Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, you subscribe there. Let's see. Want to make sure I don't skip anybody. Jonathan says Jeremy Chin and Isaiah Simmons chances. Those are Swiss Army knife pieces. Simmons has a connection to the new outside linebackers coach with the Giants. What is it? Charlie Bullen, I think his name is. But also a guy who I think fits more into a system that uses him as a blitzer and as a versatile piece, in the box. And not sure this is the defense for that. But I do know the Giants loved him, having him in the building as a person and as a player. But we'll see if that gets done. I feel like he is more likely to end up elsewhere, but going to check in on him again tonight after we do this. Brian says Tiki knows a lot about loyalty. Tudo says, Jonathan, I was literally crying at the end of the test match on TV. Tears of joy, hearts of champions. Tuto, my man, competitive. Let's see. Oh, Tudo, did you guys win that match? Did you score the upset in that match? I didn't realize that. Congratulations. Let's see. Bandit says, give me Justin Simmons to piss Philly fans off. Tudo, okay. Here he says, Jonathan, we were plus 1,200 underdogs last Saturday, but our coach, my former club DC, also head coach, taught me everything I know. He didn't sit on the bench and allowed me to destroy the other team all day. Wow. Okay. Congratulations. All right. How long of a leash does Evan Neal have, assuming his performance is substandard? 3 games, 5 games? Age 5,000, I think that the Giants are in such a position of needing to win games and show progress immediately that, like, if Evan Neal doesn't show it in camp, right? Like, you can't come out of camp if he doesn't attack it and win it and lock it down. You can't come out of camp with confidence in him, then he can't be your guy. He has to instill a strong amount and a high amount of confidence in you right away. But certainly I think it would have to be a short leash if you took him into the regular season off of like a so-so camp, let's say. Excited for Ella Manor. Think he adds so much flexibility to the line. He should help. Giants need a draft like the Rams had last year, said Just One NYG. Ain't that the truth? Les needs a guy that everybody can learn from. Great general manager with the Rams out there in Los Angeles. You're right. It's about finding value. And certainly one thing the Burns trade does do is takes away that extra second round pick that I think it made the Giants feel so much richer in this draft, right? But obviously they felt like it was valuable to get this player. And they did have competition for Brian Burns as well. So it's part of the reason you got to pay that. Let's see. Mike says they are taking a quarterback at 6. Just embrace the rebuild. JJ or wide receiver at 6, says Steven. Listen, until the Giants are out of the quarterback game, they're in. That's what I think. So, but right now, I think the way the board is falling, it's looking like 3 quarterbacks there, and then the top 3 wide receivers are 4, 5, 6 available. Maybe the Chargers are taking a lineman instead of a wide receiver. It's going to be hard not to take that wide out. You also might have teams moving up for players. And we talked about earlier, they could slide down and still get a guy. But J.J. McCarthy and the quarterbacks are who I'm looking at and studying most to answer that question right now, because there's too much smoke and fire about J.J. McCarthy, not only with the Giants, but in the NFL in general. Teams like the Broncos like J.J. McCarthy. And so, if the Giants are going to draft one, you got to think they're going to draft one high. But again, so many great skill players available there. Let's see. Penix throws better than JJ. I agree. Stanley says, hey, Pat Leonard, I don't understand why the Giants don't want to pay Saquon Barkley when he's the face of the franchise and a generational talent, but now other teams are willing to pay him top dollars. Yeah, and the one thing about the Eagles is, now listen, again, they were a disaster the second half of the last year, so it's not like the Eagles always do things correctly. They've also lost, remember, Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox, the 2 linchpins of the offensive and defensive fronts that have dominated not only the Giants, but a lot of the NFL for years, right? So they're a team that's kind of, rebuilding parts of themselves on the fly. They're certainly, reevaluating everything about how they run their process after how poorly it went at the end of last year. But when a team that's as savvy as the Eagles, that manages themselves as well, that continually kind of rebuilds itself back into contention as the Eagles have recently. They won the 1 Super Bowl. They got back to another. When they invest in a player like this, it is a little bit worrisome when you say, well, wait a second. Were we not properly evaluating or evaluating that player? And I do think it comes down, Stanley, to certain teams are at different positions. And the Giants drafted Saquon with a flawed thinking process. He was going to be the piece that elevated Eli Manning and the Giants offense to help their 2-time Super Bowl winning quarterback to one more run, as well as a guy to build around for the future. But they were so much more than a talented running back and a dynamic weapon away on offense. They needed an offensive line. They needed defensive pieces all over the place. They needed better coaching, right? They needed so much more. And so this is about a team that is probably, or that's definitely compared to the Giants, this is adding him to a team that is more prepared to use him to the max than the Giants are. Like, you and I can both sit here, close our eyes, and think about how many bigger plays Barkley will be able to make in space at times for the Eagles than he was for the Giants, purely because of the blocking he will have, the talent he will have around him, the fact that, like, when teams play the Giants, they have to prepare for Saquon. They have to prepare for Dexter Lawrence on defense, right? So when you play the Giants haven't had enough around him for the opposing defense to say, well, we can't just focus on Saquon now, right? They have other good players, but they don't have other players that are like change the way the defense has to approach the game, right? And when you add him to a team like Philadelphia, the team can't just, if they want to double A.J. Brown, but they also want to key on the run and stop Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. And to me, Jalen Hurts, you talk to people around the league and the Eagles, they know Jalen Hurts needs to get back to running the football. The Eagles need to get back to running the football with Jalen Hurts. He can throw off of that. You can work with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in the passing game and Saquon Barkley in the passing game. But it's going to be a run-based attack. So Saquon fills the gap and the need of, dominating and trying to punish people on the ground, but also becomes kind of the glue that connects that passing game to the run game, helps Jalen Hurts as a weapon there, and can be Hurts can be the facilitator with all of these, game-breaking options around him. And so, Stanley, to answer your question, it is discouraging that the Giants didn't get anything for him in a trade last year, that they weren't able to secure him as the face of their franchise. We've certainly heard John Mara say that that's what he wanted to happen ultimately in this scenario. But it is also coming down to the differences in how teams are built and how they can use that player at the time, and why they feel like he's not only valued there as a player, but also why they can use him to that value. Bandit says, who's playing corner? We have one. Well, the Giants have other corners. They just don't have enough that you are saying you trust, right? They definitely are in the corner market. I would actually think corner would probably be the next level of signing the Giants would make, right? That's probably the most likely position. I'm going to skip some repeat questions that I know were asked earlier, just so you know, but don't be offended. Antonio says, what's up? I'm a little late. No worries, Antonio. Nothing on Ashawn Robinson. Presidential Mike says, sucks to be a Cowboys fan. I mean, Mike, doesn't it always? Come on. I mean, we got to dump on the Cowboys people here if they're here. Doesn't it always suck to be a Cowboys fan? I mean, especially, wouldn't you rather just be a bad team rather than dominating a lot of teams during the year, losing some close games to good teams, keep getting your fans on edge for the playoffs, and then getting in and just flopping after, like winning in the wild card round? Cowboys always, come out of the gate slow. But, with Dorrance Armstrong going to Washington, they lose Tyler Biadasz, their center. But Armstrong from the D-line going to Washington follows Dan Quinn. Interesting to me because the Cowboys, they already knew they needed to stack their defensive front and invest in their defensive front after that playoff loss to the Green Bay Packers. And now look what you have to do, right? Just, you lose another piece off the front. C-Note says, been a fan since 63. I hate that Barkley and McKinney won't be here when this turns around. Biggest thrill of 86 was seeing guys who were there from the beginning become champs. Love the show. C-Note, that's a really interesting point. So we're 83 minutes into the show, and this is one of the more interesting points I think that has been made tonight by our loyal fan base here on the Talkin Ball live Q&A with Pat Leonard here on the YouTube channel at PL on NFL. Remember to subscribe and hit the like button. If you don't have the super chat or super sticker, you can pay for a super chat or super sticker and have your comment answered or your question answered first. But if not, just hit the like button. It helps support what we do here. It pushes to YouTube that we are driving traffic, that we are talking ball, and that we are talking Giants. And it helps us grow this community that I look forward to doing these every week. I look forward to doing them twice a week. And to get a lot of joy out of learning more from you guys and out of bringing information to you. But C-Note brings up a really good point. He says the biggest thrill of 1986 was seeing guys who were there from the beginning become champions. And this is something that the Giants have really struggled with recently, is retaining their own, like the homegrown guys, Like this is why Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence are players that you love to build around and you want to pay when they show they've done it. And even why, from the Giants organization standpoint, that Daniel Jones got paid. It's that they understand the value of drafting and paying and rewarding your own. And they know that that's something that from their own experience, to your point, C-Note, is the ideal scenario. That's part of why the Saquon Barkley situation just felt so sour over the last, 12 to 18 months, was that he was caught between that and the positional value argument and a new general manager who didn't want to pay a running back. And, it never aligned. And that's part of what brought us here today. Steven says, hey, Pat, great to be talking. Great to be talking to my birthday, compadre, again. That's right. Yes, shared a birthday. That's right, Steven. Fair to say that unless Daniel Jones has an MVP type season and leads us to the playoffs, we will turn to a rook and be years away again. That's interesting, Steven. I think the idea is bringing in a quarterback this year so that next year, if you're turning to a new quarterback, he's not a rookie, right? He's a guy that you've developed, that you've had in the building, maybe got some run this year when the season started going downhill and ends up taking over the reins. So at least he has some development. You had the coaching staff working with him, and you have a little bit of a softer landing, hopefully. Also, the reason why they brought Russell Wilson into their building, right? Clearly, the Giants understand that this is about getting this right back together, right? Like it kind of came apart at the seams last year, and they're trying to scotch tape it back while also building for the long term. But yeah, yes, Stephen, it is fair to say that the Giants are planning for life without Daniel Jones. And so that's, quarterback is the position to watch for them all offseason, both in the veteran market continued and in the draft for sure. But, it's the injury history too. It's not just Jones's play. So, you want to give him an opportunity in the offense, the opportunity to elevate around him so he can elevate. And Brian Dable certainly needs that to happen for his own sake. But if not, the Giants are moving on. And that puts you in a tough spot, Steven, though, because they do that. And like you said, if it's years away again, now you have Dexter Lawrence is deeper into his contract, Andrew Thomas deeper into his contract. If Daniel falls flat, that means new head coach the next year. Joe Shane either on the hot seat or out. And, how far away does that put you? The Giants will still have some pieces in place. They now have Brian Burns in here on a long-term deal, $30 million a year. So frankly, Steven, it puts you back in that middle ground where the Giants really struggle in those circumstances to decide between, should we rebuild fully or, hey, we still have some good pieces. So let's retool, reload, and go. So it probably puts them right back in that middle ground where they always find themselves between a rock and a hard place. All right, we have another super sticker come in here from Chris, $5. Why people believe that Giants be good enough? Say that again. Why do people believe that the Giants would be good enough? Pugh keeps rookies on bench knowing Jones will have a short leash. I think you're asking, Chris, and thank you for the super chat so much. Really appreciate that. I think you're saying that the Giants, why do people think the Giants would be good enough to keep the rookie quarterback on the bench if Jones has a short leash? Well, Chris, you bring up a great point, is that there's a difference between theory on the quarterback and reality. And in New York, you and I both know if you draft a quarterback at number 6, he's playing, right? Like that's what, when they drafted Daniel Jones number 6, when Eli Manning was here, like if you guys remember, I correctly predicted on the air on FS1. I predicted in August of that year that Daniel Jones was going to replace Eli Manning in week 3 of the season. And he replaced him in week 3 of the season. And it's because there was reporting and information behind that with the specific scenario, but it was also in New York when your starting quarterback isn't showing progress or is regressed, and the guy you just drafted to replace him looks good and looks even better than some in the building thought he was going to, and you're thinking suddenly, oh, he's ready to play. Like in New York, you don't get to sit that guy. He doesn't get to rest. Like you want to do the Green Bay plan. This isn't Green Bay, right? This is New York. So, Chris, I think that's a really good question. Like, I think that's an excellent question. All right. Thanks for the super chat again. Let's see. DX Mez says, can you say happy birthday to my friend Cam? He's a big fan. Cam, happy birthday. Happy birthday. And thank you so much for being a fan of the show and of what we do here. Your support means a lot. Everybody's support here means a lot. Mark says, I've heard you say a number of times about DJ. The Giants were top 5 or 7 in the red zone in 2022, but horrible in 2023, in which he was present for 6 games. Yeah, well, Mark, the fact of the matter is, what I was saying is that often Saquon Barkley is the one who, more often than not, was punching the Giants into the end zone more so than Daniel. They were using Daniel's legs more in 2022, and he was getting into the end zone a little bit more. which was part of the positive development, part of the reason Daboll won Coach of the Year and the Giants went to the playoffs. But as a passer down in the red zone, on third downs and in the red zone when the field shrinks, Jones does struggle more in those situations and has had some of his biggest blunders in those spots. And too often the Giants have settled for field goals rather than touchdowns. So not that he doesn't get in the end zone ever, but that clearly the Giants have trouble getting in the end zone. And my point too was, a lot of times with Saquon, you're leaning on you leaned on that player to get you in, right? Daniel would get you down there. Saquon a lot of times would get you in. And so that was my point there. Let's see. Giant Take says, so what's coming next? I think corner is a position to watch for the Giants. They have, by the way, they've re-signed Casey Kreider, long snapper, Carter Coughlin, linebacker, punt returner, kick returner, Gunnar Olszewski, all 1-year deals, I believe. And so those are some in-house things they've taken care of. You'll see the Giants doing that as they go in between some of their unrestricted free agency visits and moves for players from other teams as well, playing that market. But I think corner is a position the Giants know they really have to hit. So that's one to watch. We'll get some names to you guys on social media tomorrow on Tuesday as the market resets here. But that's one to watch for the Giants. Devin says, hey, Pat, any chance the Giants go after Danielle Hunter, or is that off the table now that we got Burns? Off the table there. Burns was not a free agent, but they were top of the market guys. And so not paying Hunter and paying Burns, that's what the Giants went with. Kenneth says, I don't think Shane and Daboll haven't proven they draft well. Okay. I think you're saying they do draft well. Is that what you're saying? Because I think the draft record is spotty. That's what I would say. Some good, but a lot to be desired. Brett says, I got excited about Alex Bachman. That pretty much sums up my last 5 years about our receiving core. The P is not silent. Brett, hard to argue there. I know the Giants do think that Wan'Dale Robinson can put a full season together the way he looked in the second half of last year. They think that'll make a big difference. Jalen Hyatt's a guy that they see coming on. You have to expand his role though, and he has to prove that he can handle that as well. They did, play him in spots strategically. And so you need to expand that role. But I agree with you. Everybody knows the Giants need more weapons. And certainly with Saquon Barkley out of the mix, they need more weapons all the more so. Let's see. Mark thinks Elamanur could also start at right guard. Let's see. Mike C says he would be happy with Tyrod at starting quarterback. Jacob says any Poyer rumors. Yeah, so Jacob's thinking in the right way here about, Buffalo had kind of its fire sale, letting guys go. Any ties to this regime, the Buffalo ties. There's now Tennessee Titans ties to watch for with some of the coaches they brought in. You can get a guy on a value deal rather than paying top of market. Those are the types of players to watch at some of those positions, especially at like a safety position where you're looking for not paying for a position you feel like that would be overvaluing it, as Joe Shane has proven with the safety position and the running back position. So I think your head's in the right place, Jacob. I haven't heard specifically that they're going after Poyer, but I think that those types of moves make sense for the Giants for sure. Tariq says Saquon is gone and now Washington is better than the Giants. We will see. I will say that many people see Washington as a team that is clearly on the rise. They have a lot of confidence in their general manager, Adam Peters, and they feel like Dan Quinn is going to make them respectable. And that's going to be a team to reckon with quickly. And that's also a team, as you allude to, that the Giants really have gotten most of their wins when they've won games in division in recent years. So that would be a problem for the Giants if Washington took a step forward. Adrian says, any chance the Giants target wide receivers such as Malik Neighbors because he can be a game changer and would be huge for us? I think the Giants would rush to turn the card in if Malik Neighbors was on the board. To me, I've said this before, like his name is so hot on the tip of everyone's tongue in the league about the draft and he's also already visited the Giants. To me, guys, when they get talked about like he does, they usually don't even last as long as the 6th overall pick. They usually come off the board faster than that. So it would be great if he was there. And so that's what's fascinating, though. If it's him versus the quarterback, as we talked about earlier, who do you take? I think somebody asked earlier if it was him and Daniels or Harrison, Daniels, and May. But what if it's Neighbors versus J.J. McCarthy, right? Who do you take then if you're the Giants? That's an interesting one. I still say, based at picking at 6, it's Neighbors, as far as like the pedigree, a guy who can help you right away. But, what are the Giants thinking, right? To me, it's hard to overlook their need at quarterback and their desire to move on from Daniel Jones in the future and be prepared for that. But also, Daboll needs to win games here. Joe Shane needs to prove some progress. So that's a fascinating one to bounce around. Mike says could have kept Feliciano. He was good enough to start in San Francisco. I agree. Let's see. We've been going an hour 37 minutes here, guys. This is crushing it. Alex says Darren Waller needs to go. Cut our losses. We need more players who are gritty, passionate, and want to play. Molly Mall says, didn't we offer him a similar deal last year with Saquon? Similar average annual value, Molly Mall, but lower guarantees. In fact, the first deal that Saquon got offered was under $20 million guaranteed total. So that was one of the things he resented, was that he felt like it got presented. He was getting these really high guarantee offers when especially the early offers were very low and, disrespectful or somewhat disrespectful as far as like knowing he wasn't going to accept it type deal. The Giants did come up into the low mid 20s, but they never came to, near where the Eagles went to with 26. And obviously the Eagles are giving him a chance to earn more. Will says, Pat, can you explain how compensatory picks work with free agency? Yeah, Will. So essentially, if players sign a certain level of contract in free agency, then they are classified into the compensatory pick formula. So it's the players you lose who go out and sign big deals. And then it's the players you bring in and sign big deals too. And so those picks, those signings, the guys who leave and the guys who come to you, they get balanced out in a chart and weighed against each other. And sometimes teams don't get compensatory picks because even though they lost big free agents, they also signed big free agents back, and it canceled each other out. And so sometimes that's why a guy like Barkley, for example, could factor and help you get a pick down the road because he went and signed a good deal with another team. But if you sign another player to a similar deal, they could end up canceling each other out, right? So that's how that works. There's a guy named Nick Korte, Korte, on X, who tweets and posts a lot about the compensatory pick formula and calculations. And he works with the website overthecap.com. And he is extremely smart and brings a lot of like good nuggets and information on that subject. So I would recommend going to follow Nick. It's Nick Korte, Korte. Thanks for that question, Will. Tariq says, I want GM Joe gone. Savage Steve, I missed you there. Sorry about that, man. Potentially sign a guy like Mike Gesicki or Poyer. So Savage Steve was all over it. Savage Steve, thank you so much for that super chat and super sticker. Really appreciate you. Gesicki, that's an interesting one. Yeah. Wouldn't put that, that's a name that makes sense to me. Guys who can, I know have some drops, but the Giants need receiving help. They need weapons, and they need maybe 2 tight ends like we talked about earlier. So Gesicki wouldn't rule that out. Haven't heard him connected directly to them yet. But again, we get these teams focus on, and so we end up focusing on a lot of the times early on, the first few things in free agency are like the big splash moves, the positions that are priorities. This is where teams are focusing their energy because it's also where the bulk of their budget is going to go. And so, you want to get those big pieces figured out before you fill in the cracks. And so the tight end position, the corner position, you're laying the groundwork as the Giants for some of these pieces, but you're not going all in and right in on negotiating specific contracts and deals until you get to this wave, right? And so that's why that happens, why they're, sometimes at this time of year, you got a cluster of guys who the team might be interested in and rumors you hear about, and then it gets narrowed down to one or two as we get closer to the real thing. Joey B, what's up, man? Molly Mall says Giants media is always saying things that aren't true. Molly Mall, what are you talking about, man? Brett says McKinney can buy a faster ATV. I'm hurting, Pat. Ouch. Joey B says, what do you think we do at draft time? Do you see any more trades or upgrades? And what about wide receiver? I think Joe Shane leaving no stones unturned. Let's see. As we've been talking, looks like the Jets signed an offensive lineman, John Simpson. Seahawks guard Damian Lewis going to the Panthers. So the Panthers were a team that was big in the offensive line market. They got Robert Hunt from Miami, paid out for him. Zach Moss, the running back from the Colts, went to the Bengals. Bengals releasing Joe Mixon. So some running backs getting paid and other running backs getting released. We saw Aaron Jones get released, right? That was a big one after Josh Jacobs signed with the Green Bay Packers. Let's see. Getting right to your questions. Joey B, yes, I see. We're talking earlier about maybe target another wide receiver. Somebody asked about Calvin Ridley. To me, I feel like Ridley's a guy who's going to get paid. I don't think, he's not going to, like Gabe Davis got good money, right? Like I think some people were impressed with the kind of money he got from Jacksonville. We'll see what that means for Ridley. But are the Giants going to sign a wide receiver for big money and draft a guy at 6? Or could they pay the wide receiver, right? And then draft the JJ McCarthy at 6, right? That could be the thing as well. So, I've mentioned corner as a position to keep watching for the Giants. I think receiver is one to watch as well. Saint Vintage says, what do you think of McConkey in round 2? Lad McConkey, I'll tell you what, man, stud. I think that kid's going to ball out in the NFL. He impressed me at the combine, Georgia wide receiver. Looks like he almost like plays faster than he even runs, and good hands, seems reliable. I would want him on my team. Daniel says Brian Burns and Devin Singletary for $35 million is a better deal than Saquon and McKinney at $29 million. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, well, I think that's debatable, Daniel. I think Saquon was your top offensive weapon and McKinney was a top 3 defensive player. So, you're getting Burns and Singletary. You're paying Burns now to be your best defensive player, right? And Singletary, you need to be a complement to everything else you have going on. But I don't think you can sit here and say definitively that that's better at that money than those two. But I think that's what the Giants are certainly betting on. Let's see. Jonathan Studios also going in on that same point. Cat Boogie says chances they take McCarthy at 6 if I really want him if May doesn't fall. I think the Giants fan base, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Giants fan base is aching for a new quarterback in here to feel some promise about the future. Am I wrong? Like I think the present is so frustrating. and even though the Brian Burns trade really does, make you kind of say, oh, right, makes you say, hey, okay, here's the plan, here's where they're going next, here's what we're thinking. But I think the quarterback position now is really the big concern, or not concern, but also like the big question, and the thing that the Giants fan base now is frothing at the mouth to figure out is, how can we feel 100% positive about our direction, right? Just a reminder, I might skip your question if it came up already, because I'm obviously deep into the queue, but you guys have been, asking so many great questions. I mean, this is one of our best chats we've had yet. I'm probably not even going to get to the end of the queue, but I'm going to try. OG says Tiki is trash for disrespecting Barkley after what he did in 2006. Yeah, I don't like it. I agree. Marine says Giants did okay. I knew Saquon Barkley was coming back, number 29. Thought he would, but Singletary pick up Brian Burns was a good trade. We move on. We start new rebuild. Hopefully, we do it right. In April draft, DJ gets one last shot. Well said. Peter says, how do we think the Burns contract affects what the Giants do at quarterback, being that Jones' contract is a black cloud in 25? I think it reinforces that they're bringing in a veteran backup and drafting a quarterback. Drafting a quarterback, you get him on cost control. Veteran doesn't cost much. OG says all the winning teams have QBs and we don't have that, Pat. Let's be real. I don't disagree with you at all, OG. Joey B says, I'm sick to my stomach. Yeah, even with the Burns trade, it's hard not to feel that feeling with Barkley leaving. Molly Mall says the Eagles are taking a step back, losing key players like Kelsey and Cox. The quarterback was already getting exposed last year. Molly Mall, I'm liking your comment there because I don't disagree with anything you just said. In fact, I was just bringing up no Kelsey, no Cox, no Fletcher Cox. But they did sign Bryce Huff, and actually the Giants were in on Bryce Huff in that edge rusher market. They end up getting Burns. They re-signed Landon Dickerson to a big deal at guard. But Molly Mall, certainly, it's possible the Eagles continue to slide and turn into a complete mess or continue to be a complete mess like they were at the end of the last year. No doubt about it. I'm not arguing that at all. I don't think that's a crazy prediction that could happen with them. They did bring in Vic Fangio, who is a legit defensive coordinator, not stumping for him or anything. He just is. Kellen Moore, of course, questions about whether that'll work out as the OC, but I think the Eagles' talent level and the operation they have in place lends itself to feeling like they have things more together. But you're right, Molly Mall. I'm not going to sit here and say, I actually think people are underplaying the amount of that was wrong with the Eagles at the end of the last season. I think it deserves to have a bright light shined on it, no doubt. Yeah, Rich, I saw you actually check in telling us Joe Mixon got released. Appreciate you. Will says if Shane misses on this guard, that's going to be a terrible look for him. Yeah, that's the thing about signing a guy like John Runyon Jr. If you do that, you need to get that one right? But as I've said, they're also looking at guards in the NFL draft as well. I've been reporting on that. I've been banging the drum for that kid from Illinois. What was it, Isaiah Adams? The Giants have been in on that market. Again, they're going to have competition for these guys. Pittsburgh Steelers, Carolina Panthers are strong in that offensive line market, Jacksonville Jaguars, etc. But Joe Shane's not done with the offensive line, trust me. Bandit says he burned his jersey. It's on Bleacher Report and Facebook. Families had season tickets 45 years, and I live in the Philly area. Wow. Bleacher already picked it up? Oh, my goodness. Bandit. Hey, well, we got a celebrity on our hands at the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard live Q&A here. Bandit burning his jersey and joining the chat. Appreciate you. And by the way, just so you guys know, not to toot my own horn or anything here, but the loyal followers here know that Saquon Barkley Eagles connection was one that I made first in the New York Daily News a week ago and right here on this live chat. talking about Saquon's potential fit with the Eagles and the Bears, the Texans, the Raiders, Patriots, and naming those select group of teams that had interest and a fit and the resources to go get them. The Baltimore Ravens were also a team that might have made it work, but the Eagles, the Texans, the Bears, the three that were in it at the end, all on my short list for Barkley. And really, the interest for Barkley ramped up from there nationwide as people started to check in with Philly and recognize they actually thought there was smoke. This was smoke. It was made up. This isn't real. And people kept coming back, like Howard Eskin from Philly, saying, well, actually, this is real. The Eagles actually really are interested in this guy. And so that's where we started. But that's the kind of stuff you'll get here, and that I hope to continue to bring to you guys on the Talkin Ball live chats and on the YouTube channel. So thanks again. All right, we're going to wind down here, but get to a few more questions. Brett says, I think Micah Parsons must have played for the Giants. He seems to respect them. Interesting. Bandit says Saquon could have gone anywhere else but Philly. OG says, Pat, remind people what Tiki said about Eli Manning before he quit on the Giants in 2006. Mr. MVP says, at the end of the day, I bleed blue. Saquon, my little bro, my baby brother, best friend. I love him, but he is now an Eagle and is the enemy during the season. No matter who on the Giants, I'm rocking with them. All right. So a personal connection to Saquon, but still rooting for the Giants over him when he comes in with the Eagles. I hear you. And that's what being a loyal fan of your team is about, for sure. You can not begrudge him doing what's best for him, but still cheer for your team, right? OG says if the Giants would have waited, they could have got Joe Mixon. That the Bengals just cut him. Brett notes that Mixon has some bad stuff in his past and he doesn't want him. That could be a factor for sure why they wouldn't. OG retorts that LT had some stuff in his past and the Giants fans still love him. Good response as well. Okay. Let's see. Ryan looks like he got frustrated with something we were talking about earlier. It says, oh my God, what is so hard to understand? You build your O-line and quarterback and running backs are finishing pieces to your build. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's what we were talking about. Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. Let's see. Brett M says, I had to burn my Giants hat when they lost to the Ravens. Well, they burn it. Lost the bet. Ryan says Saquon is awesome, but no running back can do it all by himself. That's why you don't start real rebuilds with running backs. They have short shelf lives. They are O-line dependent, and early picks don't work well for contracts. Yeah, for sure. And Ryan, that's why I think that the Giants, starting with Dave Gettleman and the organization, were resisting the criticism of the Saquon Barkley pick from the beginning. But the bottom line is they made that pick at the wrong time for their team. They weren't ready for that player. He needed to be on a different kind of team there, and they were much further away than just him. They could have traded back maybe and gotten Quentin Nelson instead for their offensive line, but Dave Gettleman would not answer the phone when the Giants were on the clock for the number 2 pick. He would not answer the phone when teams are trying to move up. Trey says, don't draft any more Penn State guys. They all go home eventually. Brett says our line was never good enough for Saquon to dance, hit the hole, and go break Brandon Jacobs style. Richard Ryan says, wonder if Hendon Hooker could be had. Goff will be there for years. I remember the Giants liked him during last year's draft. That's an interesting idea, Richard. I think you're thinking, man. We got to get you into a front office. I still think that's a guy, if you're the Lions, you invest in that pick for the future too. Like you keep him in the building and develop him because you never know what's going to happen. Having depth at quarterback's a good thing. And so, like Jordan Love, I know Hooker was older though, but like Jordan Love waits 3 years and then plays in the 4th year. I mean, I believe Hendon Hooker is older, but if you're Detroit, I don't think you offload that player. But I don't hate your rationale and your thought process at all. But I haven't heard his name pop up as available. OG says if Washington gets it right with a quarterback, the Giants are done in the NFC East. Interesting. All right. And coming down the stretch, Man, you guys are crushing it. Crushing it here. Michael O'Brien checks in with a super sticker. Thoughts on Bobby Skinner? He scammed me. Bad guy. Bobby with Talking Giants. I don't know Bobby personally. He scammed you. What happened? What happened? I don't know what you're talking about. That would be a shame if that happened, but I don't know what you're talking about, Michael. But thank you for the super chat. Brett says they didn't let DeVito throw a pass, and he wins 3 games in a row. Who's running the ship? Exactly. All right, let's see. Can Neighbors go before Marvin Harrison Jr.? Yeah, that's the question right now. I still think some people feel like the Neighbors stuff is a lot of he's a great player, but in the end, the hype is not going to overtake the kind of prospect Harrison is. But to me, I've never heard the types of things I've heard about a prospect like Neighbors and not seen him go in the top 5. You know what I mean? That's what I would say. Obed says they need a quarterback. Who is throwing them the ball? Yeah, who's saying the Giants don't need a quarterback? Did I say they don't need a quarterback? What are you talking about? I don't understand why Giants fans don't want J.J. McCarthy at 6, Stanley says. He's a proven winner. Yeah, that's fair. Thoughts on DeVito and Tyrod? I don't think DeVito is more than what he's shown he's been. And, I think Tyrod makes sense to me for him to end up playing somewhere else, somewhere where he would not get benched for a guy like DeVito when healthy, which is what happened. So, but I like Tyrod. I mean, he tends to be sometimes reckless with his body for sure. It can result in injuries, but at the same time, I felt like he was their best quarterback on the roster last year. Doug says, can you confirm the max value of Burns' contract? Does that include all incentives? What I know is it's 150, 87.5 million guaranteed. I don't have any more of the details on it yet, Doug. So that's what I know. All right, let's see. Mark says, Pat, since Burns was traded, does that mean he doesn't enter the comp pick calculations? Mark, I don't believe he does enter the comp pick calculation because he was a trade. I believe that because he was acquired via trade, he does not factor into that. Have to confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that it's only free agents, and so you acquire a guy like that via trade, and then you sign him, he should not factor in. That's my understanding of that. Let's see. Root for the laundry, not the name on the back, says Master of Coin. Hey, guys. Mark, first of all, thanks for that super sticker again. Thank you, everybody who checked in with a super chat and a super sticker. Really appreciate it. And Chronicles, yeah, I see you're talking about Michael saying false things about Bobby to ruin his reputation. Don't be jealous of others. Yeah, listen, I don't know what that's about. That has nothing to do with me. But I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate everything you've brought to this chat. I appreciate all of your insight. I appreciate your super chat and super stickers, all the likes that you've hit while we've been on. And I hope that if you were new to this chat and this channel tonight, that you subscribe and that you got something out of it, and that you'll come back when we do our next one on Thursday at 9 p.m. to talk more Giants, talk more NFL, talk more ball, and get more info and insight to you guys on what the Giants are going to do at corner, what they're going to do at wide receiver, what they're going to do at quarterback, something we really are drilling in on all spring on the quarterback position. And thank you to all of you for such a vibrant chat and for being here. Remember, you can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, YouTube. At PL on NFL is the handle. On X, my handle is at PLeonardNYDN. I'm on the New York Daily News website, of course, nydailynews.com/sports. And I am on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast on the Believe Network. We are sponsored here by Bet Online and also by Estate 98 Coffee. It's an Esencia de Cafe from El Salvador. Dates back to 1798. You can make an iced coffee or a hot coffee in literally like 3 seconds. I drink it all the time when I'm doing the Talkin Ball podcast. Not tonight. I'm drinking red wine because it was a long day. As Brett says, he feels a little bit better. Thank you, Brett. I hope it did help. Chronicle says, work the phones. We need to know the plans for tomorrow. So check me on X, what used to be Twitter, on Tuesday for more updates on where the Giants are headed next. Thank you guys so much. Talk to you next time on the Talkin Ball Live.